have another question that from Anthony Merlacci asks, what are your favorite fits for Gobert? This may be easier. Who is top 5 or bottom 5? Because every team gets better with Gobert. I love the phrasing of that. Your team is not getting worse because that's Rudy Gobert. And if it does, it's probably franchise malpractice based off what said team gave up or what they put around him. So before I get into my favorite destinations or kind of tackling all the teams that I see, I'll go from worst to best that I could see going after him. The Hornets package, it's tough. You have Rudy Gobert owed 4 years, 170 left on his deal. And that's something where I think that's where you expect him to fully opt into that final year of his contract when we get there, based on how old he will be. That doesn't quite feel like enough, even if you're factoring in that Gobert's market value is going to be lower than his actual on-court value because of the contract. Gordon Hayward, I doubt Utah wants him back after the way that he left there. You have 2 years, 60 plus million left on his deal. Maybe there's a third team that's willing to take him on, but are they sending Utah anything substantial? Because as of right now, PJ Washington is extension eligible. So that's someone you immediately have to turn around and reinvest in. James Bouknight probably has minimal trade value, even though he was a lottery prospect last season. He had some moments in summer league, but like the Hornets didn't rely on him that much this season. So again, it's one of those driving the car off the lot situations where the pick, his where he was drafted has more value before he was actually selected. And so that's come down quite a bit. I don't know if you're getting Rudy without including Kai Jones, and this was just to give the Jazz another big man prospect there. I'm also assuming that they're going to want more than just one first round pick, and it's different if you have a blue chip prospect you're sending them, but neither PJ Washington nor James Bouknight is that blue chip prospect. Charlotte specifically is also a little bit hamstrung because they have that first round pick that's lottery protected until the end of time that's now owed to Atlanta, it's not lottery protected at the end of time, but the protections on it are a little bit weird. And so are the Jazz willing to accept an offer where they're not getting picks until further down the line, and maybe they can even get 13 and 15 from Charlotte this season? But are they okay with accepting that? I think at minimum you need to have both 13 and 15 in here, and you probably need to find another taker for Gordon Hayward. And there might even need to be like future first beyond that, which will be contingent upon their obligation to Atlanta actually conveying. So my favorite, or what I think the most sensible destinations are, there are more teams than this, but I have jotted down, I think it's 10 teams or 9 teams that I could see going after Gobert. And I have them listed in like order of, I don't like dig the fit to I love the fit. And I threw trade assets basically out the window here. The Kings, we'll start off with them. I could just see them, look, Rudy Gobert, someone shiny. He really could anchor a defense. Are they like, what would they do to try and get Rudy Gobert? Would they want to pair him with Sabonis? Are you trying to use Sabonis as primary bait there? Does that even make sense for Utah? How much of your picks are you giving up? They're just a team that I could see trying to get involved. I don't think they should. I hate the idea of Gobert there. You're either left with Sabonis or Rashawn Holmes, depending on who they're giving up. And he doesn't fit with either one of them. And maybe you're trying to give up both of them in whatever deal. I don't even know what the structure of a trade looks like, but because the Kings are so bad on paper and in actuality defensively, I could see them getting involved. Don't think they should. People have mentioned the Raptors. I guess Rudy Gobert fits the motif of just defense. But like, he doesn't fit the theme of, we want these like 6'7" to 6'8" to 6'9" guys who can fly around everywhere on the court. And then even if you just want to have that rebounding presence, that generational rim protector, maybe even someone who gives you just like lob threats, someone who's going to really like devastate out of the pick and roll and set probably the hardest screens on your team. Like, your floor spacing is kind of all over the place already. And you feel like you want for half court creation. Rudy Gobert doesn't give you any of that. And what are you giving up to get him? Like, I'm not giving up Pascal Siakam for Rudy Gobert, especially considering how well Siakam played this season. I'm not doing it. Would I give up OG Anunoby? I guess because Scotty Barnes is there and all these defensive options you have. Great. Is Utah willing to accept him plus salary filler as the primary package structure? I don't know. I just don't love the offensive fit there. I've seen the Bulls suggested by some where it's like, hey, you offer Vooch, Patrick Williams, whatever picks you need to attach. Definitely sort of gives them a ton of defensive appeal with Caruso and Lonzo Ball. If they're both healthy next season, you also would still have Ayo Dosunmu, unless you have to give him up as part of that, and maybe a Javonte Green. There's a lot of different things you could do defensively there. I would not love the floor spacing. And I know that Vooch was not shooting the ball great for most of this season, but he's at least someone who can space the floor. And when you have DeMar DeRozan on the court, that is incredibly important. And like, yeah, Lonzo Ball is a higher volume 3-point shooter at this point. Alex Caruso is really not quite there yet. So you're kind of in a situation where you might have 3 below average shooters on the floor at any given point in the game, and then 2 of them just aren't going to take those threes. I just feel like, after giving up what you did for Vooch, knowing that you have that draft pick owed to Orlando down the line, that's just not something I'm considering. I don't think it elevates their team just enough. They need more of like a star-powered wing than they do like a pivot at the big man spot. And, depending on what happens with Zach LaVine's free agency, I fully expect him to re-sign with the Bulls on a max. Are you more incentivized to do the Rudy Gobert trade? You have to be more incentivized to make this a trade with urgency. I just don't like the idea of Gobert in Chicago. Golden State, I feel like probably isn't talked about enough. They might win the title this season, so maybe that's why. But like, they have the Andrew Wiggins contract. They have James Wiseman. There's Kuminga, Moody. They can offer some future picks. Their 2024 pick is owed to Memphis right now as part of that Andre Iguodala salary dump. So there would be that to consider. They could build some interesting packages, and maybe you don't want to give up Wiggins. And if you don't, then yeah, you're sort of like, that whole thing is scuttled. And Wiggins has had some pretty big moments for them over the past few postseason games, but it would just be something to consider if that's, they have James Wiseman sort of sitting there. He's barely played over the past 2 seasons, does have some mystery box appeal if he's healthy. If Utah is looking to hit reset or just believes that it can make, a sort of a more lateral move by going from Gobert to Wiggins and Wiseman next season, you get another big on the cheap to play a bulk of the minutes. And then I'm assuming other assets would be involved in there from Golden State's perspective. There's Moses Moody and Kuminga, like I mentioned. That's something to just look at. I don't love the Gobert Draymond fit together. And I know Draymond has played with Looney, would be my sort of counter to that. And neither of those two are floor spacers, but it's a little bit different when Looney's been in the Warrior system for so much. Is Gobert going to be able to make the same type of offensive reads? I don't know, but the Warriors do at least seem to have like some commitment to getting into at least a more conventional pick and roll attack. Otherwise, I don't know why they picked James Wiseman in the first place. So I'm making a lot of inferences there. Just a team, again, they're not towards the top of my list. I have the Blazers coming in here. So I did end up listing 9 teams, and they are number 5 on this list. I love Damian Lillard and Rudy Gobert and Anthony Simons, like the idea of them together. I don't think the Blazers are at the point where they should do that. That being said, they could have a top lottery pick in this year's draft. Are you willing to give that up for Gobert? You shouldn't be. I want to make that clear. However, if you're committed to competing with Damian Lillard, rebuilding around Damian Lillard, whatever you want to call it, he's 32. Like, the rebuild can't last that long. You are obligated to at least search out these bigger swings like this. Looking at the overall package, aside from this year's pick, what else are you giving up? Is there a Yusuf Nurkic sign and trade there because the market's so barren of cap space? Utah maybe wants a big to just slot in the middle in place of Gobert. Again, these players do very different things, but you start from there. You have Eric Bledsoe's partially guaranteed salary. You can fully guarantee it to sort of help grease the wheels of this trade, depending on the extent that Utah would be rebuilding. I'm not looking at including Josh Hart if I'm Portland, because you're trying to maximize your immediate chances, and to give up Josh Hart and a top pick to get Gobert in addition to whatever salary it takes, like that sort of puts you in like, it's, again, Gobert, generational defensive talent, but you still do need like wing depth on this roster. They're not chock full of established contributors after moving CJ McCollum, Larry Nance Jr., Robert Covington, and Norman Powell at the trade deadline in favor of just a bunch of flyers and mystery boxes and unproven prospects. So, you have Justice Winslow you could throw in there as well. Maybe Nas Little has some appeal there. Greg Brown III, super athletic. So there are packages that you can make, but it has to be more of a future like driven package catering to that for Utah. And look, their pick is projected to come in at I think number 6 this year if the lottery odds hold. That's, if you're Utah, like that's a pretty good springboard into whatever you're doing, whether you're also trading Donovan Mitchell or just looking for a retool around him. The next team that I have on this list, and now we're starting to get into places that I actually would enjoy seeing Gobert. The Hawks have become like a fairly popular destination. Clint Capella and what? I'm not giving up DeAndre Hunter in this if I'm Atlanta, not because I think he's indispensable, but again, you're trying to optimize the team around Trae Young for winning immediately. it sort of defeats the purpose to get rid of yet another wing while having an incoming big here. That's so important, that when that wing in Hunter is so important to your defense, even if he didn't make the progress that you wanted to see from him this season. And if you're Utah, like DeAndre Hunter's extension eligible, would you want him on your roster? Sure. Like if it's someone you could get, but you don't want to have to view him as the centerpiece of a deal. So are we talking about future picks in Capella? And then you have salary filler. Do they want another Bogdanovich? They have the Gallinari salary is partially guaranteed for next season. So there are ways to include him in this deal. There's also just like, I really like Jalen Johnson. That's someone Utah could take a flyer on. They could also take a flyer on Sharif Cooper as well. And so you can build a lot of interesting packages. There's also just Clint Capella and John Collins. Like that's a framework, if there are picks included or whatever, that you could work out with Utah for Gobert. I don't know that, I get the train of thought of, if we have Capella, really how much worse are we defensively? With the current perimeter talent on your team, I'd probably argue a lot worse. And so you need to find ways to address that. Would Atlanta, Onyeka Okongwu, that's someone that you could sort of slot in whether you're rebuilding or trying to be more of a lateral moving team. Atlanta, though, it doesn't make sense to make this trade unless Capella is headed to Utah or there's a third team involved. There are different levels of packages there. So like Capella picks Jalen Johnson, Sharif Cooper, Onyeka Okongwu, and then even if John Collins is on the table, like maybe that's where the third team and fourth team comes into play, a team that really wants John Collins. There's just a lot of options there. And I think that Rudy Gobert next to Trae Young is a no-brainer. You can just look at how many times that Trae Young connected to Clint Capella or even John Collins for that matter on assists this season. I think he does a lot for them on defense. They still need more perimeter talent there. But if you still have Hunter, maybe bring back DeLon Wright. Could you still turn around and make another move just because you do have a lot of middle rung salaries on this team? Where do you enter the Jeremy Grant sweepstakes? And we have a question on the specific to the Hawks coming up. I'll follow it up right after this, actually, so that we're still sort of topical. The next team I have, this might sound weird, and people have killed me for suggesting Miles Turner be traded to this team during the season, but just the Grizzlies. I mean, Rudy Gobert is not someone who gets matchupped off the floor, and Steven Adams did in the playoffs already. So if you're including Steven Adams as the primary salary matching fodder, Memphis has all their own picks moving forward. They have Zaire Williams. They have Golden State's pick in 2024. They also have Utah's pick. They have Utah's pick this season and that Golden State pick. So yeah, there's like a lot of different packages they could build if Utah's okay with going and sort of pandering to the future more. I don't think you're not getting Desmond Bane. You're not getting Jaren Jackson Jr. And you're certainly not getting John Moran. Everyone else, I imagine, would be on the table. You want Brandon Clark, you have Brandon Clark. Xavier Tillman is there. If you want Dylan Brooks, like you're trying to make more of the lateral play and you're viewing this as, okay, Steven Adams could technically play for us, but maybe we don't view him as the centerpiece of this deal, but it's at least someone who's competent center. Do we sign another big who's perhaps a better, less schemable defender and try and move forward that way? Dylan Brooks is really going to help out your defensive mojo there on the perimeter. Or maybe do you want a DeAnthony Melton to strengthen sort of your backup guard minutes and give you just a go-getter on defense there as well? There is so much that Memphis could propose. I don't love what Rudy would do to Memphis's floor spacing. At the same time, like they just figured it out with Steven Adams and Jaren Jackson Jr., his volume from three, even when he's not hitting them, gives you a ton of flexibility. Don't know how much he improves the half-court offense specifically in a playoff setting when you're looking at Rudy Gobert. That being said, just imagine the defense here. If you're going to have Rudy Gobert, Jaren Jackson Jr. in the same front line, you're still going to have one of, if not both, of Dylan Brooks and DeAnthony Melton. You could bring back Tyus Jones. You still have the flexibility to bring back Kyle Anderson. Desmond Bane has really stepped up defensively for a lot of the playoffs. That defense is already pretty terrifying, and there's like a chaos to it. Gobert gives it like a structure, but like this sort of impenetrable structure. That's probably my most out there team for this exercise, perhaps, but I would absolutely enjoy seeing it. Checking in at number 2, I have the Charlotte Hornets. The fit just makes too much sense, and we already outlined what the different packages could look like. You might need a third and fourth team to take on the Gordon Hayward salary, or if Terry Rozier ends up being a part of it, you need so much, you just want shooting around Gobert that I think keeping Rozier is more important than Hayward. And just Rozier is going to be dependable when it comes to availability at this point. We know Hayward is not. I would absolutely give up both my first rounders this year if I'm Charlotte. I'm not a fan of them upping their timeline when LaMelo Ball is only entering year 3. I get the I get the urgency though. If you really are concerned about him becoming disenchanted with the franchise, you've moved on from James Borrego already. So I don't want to see them. And to the extent, I don't even know what mortgaging their future looks like. If you're not trading LaMelo Ball, then I guess it's kind of like, all right, what are you really giving up or sacrificing? And you don't want to have so many of your first round picks into the distant future accounted for, even when factoring in the obligation to Atlanta. I would give up a distant first plus these two and then filler salaries with PJ Washington for Gobert. I'd include Kai Jones there as well. So again, the math I'm just throwing out. I'm literally, if I'm Charlotte, I would be okay throwing the kitchen sink if it's only we're talking about one distant first. If you're getting into the realm of two, in addition to everything else, that gets a little iffy. And not a little iffy, that gets mega iffy because I don't know if Rudy Gobert makes you a contender. He certainly makes you more interesting defensively. Certainly could be a good fit with LaMelo Ball when you look at the types of passes he seems ready to throw. But everyone can, there's no one here that's indispensable to them aside from LaMelo Ball. Some are going to suggest a Miles Bridges sign and trade. I don't see Utah being about that. And you also need Miles Bridges' cooperation there. I imagine even with the limited cap flexibility for teams this summer, he'd be able to find a destination that he might prefer, or at least an offer sheet, rather than work out a sign and trade to a team that's maybe rebuilding or doesn't plan on having him like in this huge role. So I would view a Miles Bridges sign and trade as out of the question. I don't mind a he and Rudy Gobert front court as long as we're on it. Like Miles Bridges needs to shoot better on jumpers, but he's super explosive. And if you think that he'll up his clip on threes, the stuff he could do off the dribble, you could run quote unquote dual big pick and rolls with these two if you really wanted to at least test it out, even though I don't necessarily consider Miles Bridges a big. His also malleability positionally on defense becomes a lot more valuable if Rudy Gobert is behind him, because there does feel sort of like an aimlessness to his capacity to switch at this point. But yeah, it's look, any prospect aside from LaMelo Ball that they want, the PJ Washington, James Bouknight, Kai Jones, they're on the table. 13 and 15 should be on the table. And at one of the distant first round picks, and again, you have to structure it because they have the obligation to Atlanta at this point. I'm not ruling it out for Charlotte, and I think Rudy Gobert makes them exponentially better, albeit not quite a contender. I would still argue they need like a stronger perimeter body than having a Kelly Oubre Jr. as their best defender on the perimeter, or maybe you view it as, Cody Martin. That's fine. Maybe you consider it Jalen McDaniels. I would just argue that that's just going to create even more problems. So can you turn around and still figure out a way to trade Jeremy Grant while making the deal for Gobert? You have the salaries to make things interesting thanks to that partially guaranteed deal of Oubre, like expiring at 12.6. You have Terry Rozier at 21.5, Hayward at 30.1, Mason Plumlee partially guaranteed on a $9.1 million expiring contract next season. PJ Washington's at 5.8. Even James Bouknight at 4.4 million. Like there's just a lot of money to shoehorn in here. So if you can turn around and make another deal, yeah, you're mortgaging more of your future at that point, but you're upping the defense, and it seems like you want to make this a win now timeline around LaMelo Ball. I would argue against the absolutely nuclear route, but there's no denying the fit of Gobert in Charlotte. And my final team, this is the obvious one, is Dallas. Like the fit there is just, it's perfect. You could play him with Maxi Kleber at the 4 alongside Gobert. Like that's, Kleber provides more than enough stretch there. Would probably be the single best defender that Rudy Gobert had since this past season. I think Royce O'Neal is going to be above Kleber, but having Dorian Finney-Smith, Kleber in the same like rotation, you've already just beefed up your defense like past the rim, past the restricted area, way more than Utah ever did this offseason. Where I've started to run into issues, I don't know what Dallas is giving up here. They have the 26th pick, okay, so you can give Utah an immediate pick, but they owe their 2023 selection to the Knicks. It's top 10 protected. It will convey, let's just assume. So then you're looking at the soonest first round pick you could convey in this deal, aside from trading this year's draft pick after the fact, is 2025. And then you don't have any other blue chip prospects on this roster. Maybe Utah wants Maxi Kleber as part of this deal, and that you can't break. That's not a make or break. Shouldn't be a make or break for Dallas. But like using Dinwiddie or Bertans' salary or Powell's salary, Bullock's salary, Maxi Kleber's salary, maybe they're even intrigued by Dorian Finney-Smith as he begins that 4-year, $56 million extension next season. Like those aren't names that are going to be viable centerpieces for a deal with Gobert. There is Jalen Brunson. I don't think Utah's going to want to acquire him in sign and trade negotiations. Maybe this is a situation where you're sending Jalen Brunson via sign and trade to another team and getting more draft picks to arm yourself with. But unless Utah wants number 26 plus, to get out, to get more salary flexibility in the shorter term, just because Powell comes off the books after next season. Davis Bertans only has 2 years left of his deal before that non-guaranteed one in the final year. Spencer Dinwiddie only has a partial guarantee the year after next. So there are shorter term salaries you could exchange Gobert for, or even a Reggie Bullock, technically an expiring contract next year when you look at the structure of that. The same with Kleba. But like number 26 and then a 25, 27, and 29 first round. Like if you're Utah, does that even like wet your whistle knowing that how young Luka Doncic is? You can include swaps in there as well. It feels like this would take a third team scenario, but it's very clearly the team that makes the most sense for Gobert. The defense is already fairly strong, especially if you're going to keep Dorian Finney-Smith as part of the equation. Like you're in business and you have Reggie Bullock there. Some of these players might need to be moved. I know that, including Maxi Kleba, but the Luka, Rudy Gobert connection makes all the sense in the world. And not ideally, but like if you're, because I don't think Utah wants Jalen Brunson, like there's a scenario where you're keeping Jalen Brunson as part of this too, maybe even Spencer Dinwiddie as well. So you're not losing anything from your ball handling hierarchy, aside from Luke. And I think, look, the Dinwiddie addition has been great from that perspective. Jalen Brunson making this ascent this year, even from where he was at during last regular season, that's huge. I'm not saying you could afford to lose one of them, but if you need to move Jalen Brunson to get a pick or players that Utah is going to want in a sign and trade, and then you could send them to the Jazz, like that's, it's workable. You would still, I think, want another higher end offensive option. And you're now funneling your money into a player in Rudy Gobert who doesn't provide that, but it just makes all the sense in the world. If I'm Dallas, I'm probably not concerned about short circuiting any part of my future. Like if Utah wants that pick special I laid out, I might do it, especially if they take back Tim Hardaway Jr.'s contract. If they're taking back Davis Bertans' his contract, like, yeah, that's something I would absolutely consider. So those are easily my favorite destination. Well, that's my favorite destination for Rudy Gobert. Of all the ones I listed, the only teams I'm actually probably in love with the fit would be Memphis, Charlotte, and Dallas. Like those are the teams that I really want to see Gobert on. I thought about the Knicks for a second, but they're so just like ass backwards in love with Donovan Mitchell. That would be counterintuitive to whatever to whatever vision they have. And I don't, when you're what they are, Rudy Gobert makes you better, but like you need to, I think, already have someone who face of the franchise material in place. And maybe you think that's RJ Barrett. Do you think they're getting out of that trade without including RJ Barrett? Sure. But RJ Barrett isn't decidedly that player yet. And it's certainly not Julius Randle. So yeah. And you could make cases like Portland. I don't mind the fit, but I don't see Rudy Gobert doing enough to be like, oh, hey, like we're really a threat with Damian Lillard to win the title now. Brooklyn, I floated this as a joke, but like the Ben Simmons, Rudy Gobert framework, if you're figuring out a way to get Royce O'Neal back as part of that deal as well, maybe you do have some, you have a future pick from the Philly trade. You can include Philly's pick from this year's draft as well. I wouldn't hate it. I just don't see the Nets doing it. So I didn't include them.